And welcome back to part 2 of the photosynthesis. In this part, we're going to be talking about what is called the light-independent reactions, or what is more commonly known as the Calvin cycle. We just learned about the light-independent reactions in the previous video, where sunlight is used to break down water. The hydrogen and electrons are then used during different steps of the light independent reactions to produce some NADPH and ATP, which are short-term energy molecules that we'll be using here in the Calvin cycle during the second part of photosynthesis. Also, we need to mention that it was during the light dependent reactions that the oxygen was produced. So let's get moving on this second part, the light independent reactions. And the first thing we're going to see is, or in our overview here, that ATP and NADPH that we previously produced in the first half are going to be used to make high energy sugars, specifically a sugar or a monosaccharide called glucose. Okay, so the energy from the ATP and the NADPH is going to be put into the glucose. This part is going to occur in the stroma, or liquid portion of the chloroplast. If you remember, our light dependent reactions occurred across the membrane into the thylakoid. Okay, this part is going to occur outside in the stroma. So once we produce that ATP and NADPH inside, we have to move it out, or it moves out into the stroma where we can make glucose. So let's get going with the Calvin cycle. There are some different parts here, just like there were 3 parts with the light-dependent reactions. We have different parts to the Calvin cycle. The first part is what we call carbon fixation. Okay, if you remember, one of the things that plants need for photosynthesis, or the 2 things that plants needed for photosynthesis, are carbon dioxide and water. We use the water during the light-dependent reactions. We use the carbon dioxide here in the Calvin cycle. Okay, we are going to combine the carbon dioxide with a special compound called ribulose biphosphate. And don't get caught up in these names. It's not like this is not an advanced biology class. I'm going to make it as simple and quiz you as simple as possible. But it's going to combine with a substance called ribulose biphosphate. We're simply going to call that RUBP. And what happens is we are going to combine the carbon. Okay, and when that happens, this produces 2 molecules of something called 3-phosphoglycerate. Again, don't worry about that name. We're just making 2 molecules of 3-phosphoglycerate. Okay, so we need some carbon dioxide. The first part of that is joining the carbon from that carbon dioxide with RUBP to get 2 molecules of 3-phosphoglycerate. After that has occurred, after we use our carbon dioxide, we are going to go through a process called reduction. What happens during reduction? Again, we're going to use some special enzymes, and I'm not going to worry about you knowing the names of the enzymes. And we're going to take those enzymes along with that ATP and NADPH that we had produced during the first half of photosynthesis, and we are going to convert the phosphoglycerate into a substance called G3P. Okay, so we're going from carbon dioxide and RUBP combining to make 3-phosphoglycerate, which then in turn will be changed into G3P. What we are doing is reducing the phosphoglycerate into G3P. Okay, that reduction is a chemistry term. I'm not really worried that you understand that. You'll learn more about reduction when you go into, or if you take chemistry. Okay, so just keep track of where we're going. Carbon dioxide, RUBP, phosphoglycerate, G3P. So where do we go once we have produced our G3P? Remember, this is a cycle. It just keeps turning over and over. We get what is called regeneration. Okay, we're going to regenerate what we start with. Okay, and what we started with was RUBP, ribulose biphosphate. So, two things can happen to that P3G. If it goes through regeneration, it makes some more ribulose biphosphate, which will cycle back through, join with some more carbon dioxide, produce some glycerate, which will become BG3, and we just keep cycling it and cycling it to make RUBP. This is necessary to keep the cycle moving. Okay. Now, not all of the P3G is used to regenerate ribulose biphosphate, or RUBP. Some of it goes into generation of glucose, what the plant is trying to make, the high energy sugar. Okay, so it's regenerated into RUBP or generated into glucose. Okay, there are two things that can happen to that. Now, as you can see in the picture below, if you haven't been watching, it requires 9 ATP molecules and 6 NADPHs for this to happen, for each one of the G3P. Okay, this requires, again, 9 ATP and 6 NADPH. So you can see there is a lot of energy going in to producing this glucose sugar. That's why we call it a high energy sugar. Okay, so again, we have the carbon fixation. CO2 joins with the RUBP. That produces the glycerate. That glycerate then is reduced into P3G. The P3G is either regenerated into RUBP or it is used to generate our high energy glucose. Okay. I'm sorry. That is the Calvin cycle in a nutshell. So again, you have carbon fixation. Okay, as the beginning part, and you will finish with the generation of a glucose molecule. Okay, so again, to go through the process, we need carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. From that carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight, we will produce a glucose molecule and oxygen gas, or the plants will produce some oxygen gas. Okay, so six CO2, 6 molecules of carbon dioxide, plus 6 H2O, 6 molecules of water, will produce, with sunlight, 1 molecule of C6H12O6 glucose, plus 6 O2, or 6 molecules of oxygen gas. That is the second part of photosynthesis. Okay, now, photosynthesis, or the rate of photosynthesis, can change. And by rate, we're talking about how fast it can occur. And there are a few factors here I want to talk about. So let's get through those rather quickly. They're simple to understand. The first of those factors that affect the rate of photosynthesis is simply temperature. If we look here at this, the rate of photosynthesis goes up as the temperature rises, but it only goes to a certain point. As the temperature gets too high, we see that rate starts to fall back off. So there is an optimum temperature for photosynthesis. That optimum temperature is somewhere between 0 to 35 degrees. Okay, with 35 degrees being optimum. Again, quick explanation as to why. We talked about There are two very important enzymes at work during photosynthesis, and we talked about earlier when we were going over proteins and enzymes. If the temperatures get too high, the enzymes start to break down since they are made up of proteins, and once they start to break down, they cease to function. If they can't function, photosynthesis can't occur. So temperature is a key factor in the rate of photosynthesis. A second one is light intensity. Okay, obviously more light is better. More light means more energy. Okay, more solar energy for the thylakoids to absorb. Okay, again, chlorophyll is the substance that's doing the absorbing of the sunlight, so the more we have, the better. Again, there is a maximum light intensity. Okay, there is a point at which photosynthesis simply will not go any faster. You don't see that it drops off, it just plateaus. Okay, so the amount of light or light intensity is a key factor. Another factor that we have is water availability. Obviously, we need carbon dioxide and water and sunlight, so we've already talked about the sunlight. We also need to understand that water is very important. Okay, common sense tells us that if you have little water, you're going to have less photosynthesis. More water is better, less water is not good. If there is not enough water, photosynthesis will slow down or even possibly stop. Okay, so water is necessary for this process to occur. And now I didn't mention or didn't show it slide, obviously along with water available, even though I didn't make a separate slide for it, would be the availability of carbon dioxide. Okay, obviously the more carbon dioxide there is, the better photosynthesis can occur. If you have limited amounts of carbon dioxide or low concentration of carbon dioxide, photosynthesis is going down. Okay, so that is your part 2 of photosynthesis, okay, which dealt with the light-independent reactions. This because the sunlight is not necessary because the energy is provided by the ATP and NADPH produced during the first half of photosynthesis. Again, the light-independent reactions are commonly called the Calvin cycle. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, we have carbon fixation, and then that will lead to the generation of some glucose or the regeneration of RUBP. Okay, as you move on today, you're going to be doing a worksheet over photosynthesis. This is from your textbook, and it begins on pages 230 and goes all the way up to page 239, so from 230 to 239, and you will need to get that turned in by the next class. Have a great day.